Emma Reynolds never imagined that protecting her daughter Lily would push her to the edge, but when Lily accused her father Mark of something unspeakable from her babyhood, Emma made a shocking choice that would destroy their family forever. From the outside, the Reynolds family looked like the picture of perfection. Emma Reynolds was a devoted mother, always smiling and attentive, while her husband, Mark, carried himself with the quiet authority of a successful businessman. Their daughter, Lily, was cheerful and bright, and neighbors often admired the family's seemingly ideal life. The house was pristine, filled with laughter during the day and warm lights at night. Yet, beneath this calm surface, something was deeply wrong. Emma began to notice subtle changes in Lily's behavior. The little girl who had once been trusting and open now recoiled at her father's touch. She would hide behind Emma whenever Mark entered the room, her small body tense and wary. At first, Emma told herself that Lily was simply going through a phase, that children sometimes misinterpret the world around them. But the unease in her daughter's eyes gnawed at her, a constant reminder that something was not right. One evening, as Emma tucked Lily into bed, she noticed the child's fingers fidgeting nervously beneath the covers. Lily's voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but the words were sharp and clear. She revealed a memory from when she was just a baby, something that made Emma's blood run cold. The accusation was shocking and unimaginable, and yet the certainty in Lily's eyes left no room for doubt. Emma's heart ached as she realized that her husband, the man she had loved and trusted, might have caused her child harm. Sleep eluded her that night, replaced by an unbearable mix of fear, anger, and disbelief. By day, Emma tried to carry on as if nothing had happened. She greeted neighbors with her usual warmth and participated in community events, but inside, she felt trapped in a storm of suspicion and dread. Every interaction with Mark became tense, every glance loaded with unspoken questions. She noticed small details that once seemed trivial, the way Mark's tone could be sharp without reason, the moments when his patience were thin, but now each one felt like a warning sign. Emma began to realize that her world, the life she had built and cherished, might have been an illusion all along. She was left to confront a terrifying truth. The man she had married, the father of her beloved daughter, could be hiding a darkness that would change everything. And in the quiet moments, when she watched Lily sleeping peacefully, she wondered what actions were necessary to protect the child from the very person meant to love her. Days turned into weeks, and Emma found herself sinking deeper into a state of fear and helplessness. Every time Mark returned home, the tension in the house grew unbearable. Lily clung to her mother, her tiny body trembling with each step her father took, and Emma could no longer ignore the possibility that the child's accusations were true. She tried talking to Mark, subtly questioning him, searching for some sign of guilt or remorse. But he laughed off her concerns, brushing them aside with a charm that once drew her to him. His denials were convincing, yet the unease in Emma's chest refused to fade. She began to realize that legal authorities might never fully protect Lily, that any attempt to expose the truth could be met with disbelief, or worse, retaliation. The thought of leaving her daughter vulnerable under Mark's roof filled Emma with a sense of urgency and desperation unlike anything she had ever felt. Late at night, when the house was silent, Emma would sit alone in the dim glow of the living room, her mind spinning with possibilities. She scoured the internet, searching for any solution that could ensure Lily's safety. Her research led her into dark corners of the web, forums where crime and revenge were discussed in hushed tones, and stories of hired professionals who targeted those who had harmed others. She found names, contacts, and methods, each more chilling than the last. One figure kept appearing, a hitman known only as Silas, infamous for slow, calculated retribution. Unlike the usual quick acts of violence, Silas specialized in psychological torment, a methodical unraveling of his victims' lives. Emma's mind, consumed with fear and a sense of justice, began to imagine a plan. The thought of involving someone like Silas terrified her, yet the idea also brought a strange relief. She convinced herself that this was not an act of cruelty but an act of protection, a way to ensure that Mark would never hurt Lily again. Nights were spent drafting scenarios in her head, carefully considering how to make him suffer without immediate detection, imagining each step of the torment, each twist of fear that would slowly consume him. The moral weight of what she contemplated pressed on her, but the instinct to protect her daughter outweighed everything else. Emma understood she was crossing a line, venturing into a darkness from which there might be no return. The decision, once only a whisper in her thoughts, began to take shape with a terrifying clarity and irreversible path that would change all their lives forever. Within weeks of contacting Silas, the changes in Mark's life began to appear. At first, they were subtle: a misplaced set of keys, a spilled cup of coffee, small accidents that could easily be dismissed as coincidence. But each incident grew more unnerving. Tools fell from shelves without explanation. The locks on doors seemed to jam at the worst moments, and shadows appeared to move just beyond his line of sight. Mark, a man who had always prided himself on control and composure, began to sense that something was very wrong. His confidence eroded as he questioned his own perception, unable to explain the mounting series of disturbances. Emma observed from a distance, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and unease. The plan she had set in motion was working, yet she began to realize that the fear she imagined for Mark was taking on a life of its own. The quiet terror in his eyes when he entered rooms, the hesitation in his movements, became more pronounced each day. Lily, though still cautious, seemed to relax slightly when Mark was unsettled, and Emma convinced herself that the chaos surrounding him was a necessary step to protect her daughter. Silas, true to his reputation, escalated the torment with a meticulous patience. Objects in Mark's home would appear in places they should not be, personal notes vanished or were defaced, and anonymous calls filled the quiet hours of the night. Every act was calculated to erode Mark's sense of reality, leaving him anxious and distrustful of those around him. He began to see threats in every glance and heard warning in every ordinary sound. Sleep became impossible, and his work began to suffer. His once steady life was unraveling, piece by piece, in ways he could neither predict nor defend against. Yet, the terror did not come without complications. Emma started to notice that Silas was no longer responding only to her instructions. The hitman's actions became unpredictable, taking darker turns than she had imagined. Notes and warnings that Mark received included threats Emma had never authorized. The carefully controlled plan she thought she had crafted began to spiral, reminding her that once unleashed, fear and vengeance could never be fully contained. Emma felt the weight of what she had done pressing down on her. The act she had convinced herself was for protection was now spiraling into something far more dangerous than she had anticipated. As Mark's paranoia deepened, and Silas's methods grew more sinister, Emma understood that the line between justice and destruction had been crossed. The storm she had set in motion could not be stopped, and every day brought her closer to a reckoning she could not escape. Mark's life was now dominated by fear. Every step he took, every sound in the house, set his nerves on edge. Objects shifted inexplicably, doors creaked open on their own, and items he swore he had put away would reappear in odd places. Work meetings became unbearable as he replayed strange occurrences in his mind, imagining eyes watching him, threats lurking in the corners of his life. Friends and colleagues began to notice his growing paranoia, whispering behind his back, while he struggled to maintain the facade of composure that had once defined him. Emma watched quietly, trying to maintain the appearance of normalcy for Lily's sake, yet inside she was both exhilarated and terrified by the unraveling of her husband. The plan she had set in motion had exceeded her expectations. Mark was crumbling, but she also sensed that Silas was no longer under her control. The hitman had begun to act unpredictably, pushing boundaries in ways Emma had not authorized. Notes appeared with cryptic warnings, objects were placed in threatening arrangements, and Mark received phone calls in the middle of the night, voices whispering menacing phrases he could not place. The terror originally calculated to serve justice had grown into something far more sinister and dangerous. Neighbors started noticing strange behavior as well. Mark became withdrawn, skipping social events, avoiding interactions, and displaying sudden outbursts of fear when alone. Emma, meanwhile, seemed constantly vigilant, hovering near Lily, ensuring her daughter's safety while carefully maintaining the illusion of a happy home. Rumors began to circulate, small, whispered suspicions that something was deeply wrong behind the Reynolds' closed doors. Mark, desperate for answers, hired a private investigator. The presence of someone observing his life only added to the sense of dread. He became increasingly erratic, jumping at shadows, second-guessing every interaction, and lashing out at people he once trusted. The psychological torment, methodical and relentless, was taking a toll not only on his mind, but on the fabric of the household itself. Emma realized that she had unleashed forces she could no longer fully control. The line between protection and destruction had blurred. Silas's methods, once a tool for her plan, had taken on a life of their own, and the slow unraveling of Mark's reality seemed irreversible. She understood that the house, once a sanctuary, had become a theater of fear, and that every day brought them closer to a point of no return. The sense of power she had initially felt was now shadowed by a creeping dread. Justice had transformed into chaos, and the consequences were far from predictable. The unraveling reached its climax when Mark's private investigator began connecting the dots. Financial records, surveillance footage, and mysterious communications pointed toward a hidden orchestrator, someone close, someone who had intimate knowledge of the family and their routines. The truth hit with a force Emma had never anticipated. Her carefully concealed plan was no longer secret. Each step she had taken to protect Lily had left a trail, and now the authorities were closing in. Mark's paranoia, fueled by Silas's psychological games, had made him more vigilant than ever. He began to notice inconsistencies in Emma's behavior, subtle signs that had once been easy to overlook. Her constant presence at Lily's side, her nervous glances when Mark entered a room, her urgent protective instincts, all of it suddenly looked suspicious. The house that had once been a symbol of safety and love had become a prison of observation, where every movement could reveal the truth. When law enforcement finally confronted Emma, the full scope of her actions came to light. Emails, encrypted messages, and payments traced back to the elusive hitman, Silas, proved her role in the torment that had consumed Mark. The shock reverberated through the community. The devoted mother, the loving wife, had orchestrated a slow and calculated campaign of terror against her husband because of a horrifying accusation from their daughter. The story was more chilling than anyone could have imagined. Silas, true to his reputation, had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only evidence of the psychological havoc he had wrought. Emma faced the reality that her actions, once justified in her mind as protection for Lily, had turned into a criminal nightmare from which there was no escape. The courtroom became a theater of disbelief as neighbors, friends, and family struggled to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the orchestrator of Mark's slow torment. Lily, finally safe from the shadows that had haunted her, became the focus of child protection services. Her voice, once whispered and hidden in fear, was now heard clearly, guiding the adults around her to ensure her safety. The Reynolds home, once filled with laughter and light, remained empty, a chilling monument to vengeance, secrecy, and the dangerous path of desperation. Emma's choices had ensured that no one would ever see the family as whole again. The story of fear, betrayal, and retribution left an indelible mark, a reminder of how far someone might go when love, anger, and protection collide, and how quickly a life that appears perfect can descend into unimaginable darkness.